I was elbow deep in the guts of my Ford pickup when I heard my wife Dana's voice drift through the thin garage wall. 23 years of marriage teaches you to recognize certain tones, and this wasn't her talking to Harold voice. This was her honey-dripped, fake sweet voice reserved for people she wanted to impress. "He's so completely clueless, darling," she purred into her phone. "I could parade you naked through our living room and Harold would just ask if you want coffee with that." I froze, wrench halfway to the oil pan. The garage suddenly felt smaller, the October air sharper against my grease-stained hands. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. No, seriously, Owen, he has no idea. We don't even sleep in the same bed anymore. He moved to the guest room months ago, claims I snore. Her laugh was musical, practiced. He's like a piece of furniture at this point, useful for fixing things and paying bills, but otherwise completely invisible. Owen, her boss at Hartwell Industries, the logistics firm where she worked as an HR coordinator. Owen Fraser, 52 years old, divorced twice, with a reputation around town for chasing anything in a skirt. I'd met him at company parties, slick hair, expensive suits, the kind of handshake that lasted too long and felt like a challenge. "The office Christmas party is next Friday," Dana continued. "Harold will probably show up in that awful brown suit, make awkward small talk about sports he doesn't watch, then disappear into the corner with a beer. Perfect cover for us." I set the wrench down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady. In my head, I was already calculating. 23 years of marriage, 18 years in the same house, a daughter in college who still called me daddy when she needed money, all of it apparently invisible to the woman I'd built my life around. "You know what the best part is?" Dana's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "He actually thinks we're happy. Last week he suggested we take a cruise for our anniversary. Can you imagine? Trapped on a boat with Harold for 7 days, listening to him explain how the engine works." Their laughter echoed through the wall like breaking glass. I wiped my hands on an old rag and walked quietly to the side window. Through the kitchen blinds, I could see Dana pacing back and forth, phone pressed to her ear, wearing the red dress I'd bought her for her birthday. She looked animated, alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. "I have to go," she said suddenly. "Harold's probably wondering why dinner isn't started. You know how men are about their routines." She hung up and immediately began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, humming softly to herself. When I walked through the back door 5 minutes later, she greeted me with the same tired smile she'd worn for the past year. "How's the truck coming along?" she asked, not really listening for an answer. "Making progress," I said, studying her face. "Should have it running smooth by the weekend." "That's nice, honey." She was already focused on chopping vegetables, her movements precise and efficient. "Don't forget we have the office party Friday night, 7 o'clock at the Marriott downtown." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, and meant every word. That night, lying in the guest room bed that had become my permanent residence, I stared at the ceiling and planned. Dana thought I was invisible, a piece of furniture. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she could be. The Marriott's ballroom buzzed with the forced cheerfulness of corporate celebration. Hartwell Industries had rented the entire space, complete with a DJ playing sanitized classic rock and an open bar that would fuel tomorrow's regrets. I stood near the entrance in my brown suit, the awful one Dana had mentioned, nursing a beer and watching my wife work the room. She moved like a politician at a fundraiser, air-kissing colleagues, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, her hand occasionally brushing arms and shoulders with practiced intimacy. The red dress hugged her curves, and I noticed I wasn't the only one looking. Owen Fraser held court near the bar, surrounded by a cluster of younger employees hanging on his every word. He was telling some story involving golf and a client, his hands gesturing expansively, gold watch catching the light. When he spotted Dana approaching, his entire demeanor shifted. The group might as well have vanished. "Harold!" My daughter Mickey appeared at my elbow, radiant in a black cocktail dress. At 22, she had Dana's dark hair and my stubborn jaw. "I didn't expect to see you here. Mom said you hate these things." "Your mother says a lot of things," I replied, watching as Dana joined Owen's circle. "How's school treating you?" "Senior year's kicking my ass, but I'll survive." She followed my gaze across the room. "Mom seems to be having fun." "She does indeed." We stood in comfortable silence, father and daughter observing the corporate theater. Mickey had always been perceptive, even as a child. She saw things others missed, remembered details that mattered. "Dad," she said quietly, "is everything okay with you and Mom?" Before I could answer, Owen's voice boomed across the room. He'd climbed onto a small platform near the DJ booth, microphone in hand, commanding attention with the ease of someone accustomed to being heard. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." The crowd gradually quieted. "I want to thank everyone for making this year our most successful yet. But before we get too deep into celebration, I have a special recognition to make." He gestured toward Dana, who stepped forward with a modest smile that didn't quite hide her anticipation. "Dana Vance has been instrumental in streamlining our HR processes this year. Her dedication, her attention to detail, her willingness to go above and beyond." His eyes lingered on her face. "Well, let's just say she's made my job significantly more pleasurable." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Dana blushed prettily, accepting a small crystal award from Owen's hands. Their fingers touched longer than necessary. "In fact," Owen continued, his voice taking on a more intimate tone despite the microphone, "Dana and I have been working so closely together, some people might think we're married." The crowd chuckled. Dana laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "But don't worry," Owen said, winking at the audience. "Her real husband doesn't mind sharing. He's so focused on his trucks and his tools, I don't think he'd notice if Dana and I eloped." More laughter, louder this time. I felt Mickey's hand tighten on my arm. "In fact," Owen was really warming up now, "Dana tells me they don't even sleep in the same room anymore. So really, I'm just keeping her company during those long, lonely nights when Harold's out in the garage." The laughter was becoming uncomfortable now, people glancing around, sensing they'd crossed from corporate humor into something more personal. But Owen wasn't finished. "Here's to Dana Vance, everyone, the woman who makes coming to work every morning an absolute pleasure." He raised his glass, and the crowd followed suit, though the enthusiasm was notably forced. Dana stood frozen beside him, the crystal award clutched in her hands, her face cycling through embarrassment, anger, and something that might have been panic. I set my beer down on the nearest table and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Mickey calling my name, but I didn't stop. The ballroom doors closed behind me with a soft whisper, cutting off the sounds of forced celebration and nervous laughter. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, engine running, heat blasting against the December cold. Through the hotel's windows, I could see the party continuing, people dancing, drinking, pretending they hadn't just witnessed my public humiliation. My phone buzzed. A text from Dana. "Where did you go? People are asking." I typed back, "Home. Enjoy your evening." Her response came immediately. "Don't be dramatic. Owen was just joking around." I turned off the phone and drove home through empty streets, past houses glowing with warm light and the promise of families that still knew how to look at each other. In my rearview mirror, the Marriott grew smaller until it disappeared entirely, but Owen's laughter echoed in my head like a song I couldn't shake. Monday morning arrived gray and bitter, matching my mood perfectly. I sat at the kitchen table with coffee and my laptop, watching Dana rush through her morning routine. She moved with the efficiency of someone late for something important, checking her phone every few seconds. "I'll probably be home late tonight," she said, not looking up from her messages. Big project timeline. With Owen? I asked mildly. Her fingers paused on the screen for just a moment. The whole team, Harold. Don't be paranoid. After she left, I opened her laptop. Dana had always been careless with passwords, using the same combination for everything. Mickey's birthday followed by our house number. The screen bloomed to life, revealing her desktop cluttered with work documents and family photos from happier times. Her email was a goldmine of mundane correspondence, but it was her cloud storage that told the real story. Automatically synced text messages going back months, including conversations she'd deleted from her phone. Owen, can't stop thinking about Friday night. You were incredible. Dana. Harold was snoring in the guest room by 10. We could have been dancing on the kitchen table. Owen. Next time. My place Thursday? Rhonda's visiting her sister. Dana. Can't wait. Wear the blue shirt I like. I scrolled through months of messages, each one a small knife twist. They'd been meeting regularly since August, sometimes at his house, sometimes at the Riverside Motel on the edge of town. They discussed my habits, my schedule, my obliviousness with the casual cruelty of people who'd forgotten I was human. The most recent exchange was from Saturday night, after the office party. Dana. I can't believe you said that stuff about Harold in front of everyone. Owen. Relax, beautiful. Nobody cares about Harold. Half the room probably thought it was about time someone said it. Dana. Mickey was there. What if she tells him? Owen. Tells him what? That her parents don't sleep together? He already knows that. Besides, what's he going to do? Harold's not exactly the confrontational type. Dana. Still, be more careful. Owen. You worry too much. Harold's harmless. Guys like him don't fight back. They just accept whatever life hands them. It's why you married him in the first place, remember? I printed the entire conversation thread, 47 pages of evidence that my marriage had been a joke for months. Then I called in sick to work and drove to the Riverside Motel. The desk clerk was a kid with acne and boredom, barely looking up from his phone when I walked in. The registration book sat open on the counter, and it only took $20 and a story about tracking down a cheating business partner to get him talking. Yeah, they come in regular, he said, pocketing the bill. Maybe twice a week since summer. Always room 12, always pay cash. She's real pretty, but he's kind of a sleaze, you know? Tips like crap. Room 12 had a perfect view of the parking lot and the main road. I sat in my truck across the street for an hour, taking pictures of the building, the room, the license plates of cars that came and went. By noon, I had enough documentation to satisfy any divorce lawyer in the state. But divorce lawyers cost money, and they moved slowly. I was beginning to think I needed a different approach. My phone rang as I drove home. Mickey's name appeared on the screen. Dad, I've been thinking about Friday night, about what Owen said. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Just corporate humor. Bullshit. My daughter had inherited my directness along with my jaw. Nobody talks about someone's marriage like that unless they know something. Are you and Mom having problems? I pulled into a gas station parking lot and sat with the engine running. Through the window, I could see normal people living normal lives, pumping gas and buying coffee, and not discovering that their spouses had been lying for months. Your mother and I are working through some issues, I said finally. Is she cheating on you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Mickey had always been too smart for comfortable lies. I'm handling it, I said. That's not an answer, Dad. It's the only answer I have right now. She was quiet for a long moment. If you need help, or if you need someone to talk to, I'm here, okay? I know, baby. I love you. Love you too, Dad. And Dad, whatever you're planning, don't do anything stupid. I hung up and drove home, where Dana's laptop was still open on the kitchen table, still logged into her cloud account, still automatically syncing every message she sent. By evening, I had a complete picture of my wife's double life, printed and organized in a manila folder that sat on my workbench like a loaded gun. Harold Vance, the invisible man, was about to become very visible indeed. Wednesday evening found me at Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar on the south side of town where the beer was cheap and the lighting was dim enough to hide regrets. I'd been coming here since college, back when Dana and I were still discovering each other, and the future seemed full of possibility. Lyle Bannerman sat across from me in a booth that had seen better decades, nursing a whiskey and listening to my story with the patience of an old friend. We'd known each other for 30 years, ever since high school football, and he'd been my best man when Dana and I got married. These days, he owned a boxing gym downtown and served as unofficial therapist to half the divorced men in the county. "So, what's your play?" he asked after I'd finished laying out the evidence. "Divorce lawyer, private investigator, or are you thinking more direct action?" "I'm thinking Owen needs to understand that Harold Vance isn't as harmless as he believes." Lyle smiled, the expression of a man who'd seen his share of bar fights and domestic drama. "Careful, Harry. Guys like Owen, they're used to getting their way. Push too hard, too fast, and he'll find a way to make you the villain." "Maybe, but right now I'm the joke. I'd rather be the villain." "What about Dana? You still love her?" The question caught me off guard. I stared into my beer, watching bubbles rise and burst in patterns that meant nothing. "I love who she used to be," I said finally. "But that woman's been gone for a while. I just didn't want to admit it." Lyle nodded. "So what's the plan?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken at the motel, the printed messages, the timeline I'd constructed of their affair. "I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. Public humiliation, starting with Owen. And then we see how much they enjoy being the entertainment." Thursday morning, I called Hartwell Industries and asked to speak with Owen Fraser. His secretary put me through immediately, the advantage of being married to an employee. "Harold!" Owen's voice boomed through the phone with false heartiness. "How are you doing, buddy? Sorry about the jokes Friday night. You know how these corporate things get. Everyone tries to be a comedian." "No worries, Owen. Actually, I was calling to see if you wanted to grab lunch today. Man to man, I have something I'd like to discuss with you." A pause. Sure. How about that new place on 5th Street? Antonio's? Noon work for you?" "Perfect. See you there." Antonio's was busy enough to provide cover, but quiet enough for conversation. I arrived early and chose a table near the back, with a clear view of the entrance. Owen walked in exactly at noon, scanning the room until he spotted me. He moved with the confidence of a man who'd never been challenged, his expensive suit and perfect hair marking him as someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Harold!" He slid into the booth across from me, signaling the waitress with practiced ease. "Good to see you. You look well." "Thank you. You look like a man who's been getting plenty of exercise." His smile flickered slightly. "Staying active, you know. Golf, tennis, the usual." We ordered lunch and made small talk about the weather, the local sports teams, anything except the elephant sitting at our table. Owen was good at this dance, probably had years of practice smoothing over awkward situations with cuckolded husbands. When our food arrived, I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. "I want to show you something interesting," I said, opening the photo gallery. "I've been learning about digital photography lately. Amazing what you can capture if you know where to look." The first photo showed Owen's BMW parked outside the Riverside Motel. The second showed him walking toward room 12 with Dana beside him, her hand on his arm. The third was taken through the room's window, not explicit, but intimate enough to tell the story. Owen's face went through several color changes, settling on a pale green that matched his tie. "Harold, I can explain." "No need." I swiped to the next photo, this one showing them leaving the motel 2 hours later. "The pictures explain everything quite clearly." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Look, what do you want? Money? I can write you a check right now. Dana and I, it's just a physical thing. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything, I repeated, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. You've been screwing my wife for 4 months, humiliating me at office parties, and it doesn't mean anything? The restaurant had gone quiet around us. Owen glanced around nervously, his corporate composure cracking. Keep your voice down, he hissed. Why? Afraid people might find out what kind of man you really are? I stood up, leaving $20 on the table. Don't worry, Owen. They're going to find out soon enough. I walked out of Antonio's with Owen calling my name behind me, his voice tight with panic. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck and watched him through the restaurant window, frantically making phone calls. Probably to Dana, warning her that the invisible husband had suddenly developed eyes. My phone rang 5 minutes later. Harold, what the hell are you doing? Dana's voice was sharp with anger and fear. Having lunch with your boyfriend. Nice guy. We should double date sometime. This isn't funny. Owen said you threatened him. I showed him some photographs. If he felt threatened, that's between him and his conscience. Harold, please. Can we talk about this like adults? Adults? I laughed, surprising myself with how bitter it sounded. Adults don't sneak around motel rooms, Dana. Adults don't humiliate their spouses at office parties. Adults don't spend 4 months lying to the person they promised to love and honor. Silence on the line. Then quietly, I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen, and now we're all going to live with the consequences. I hung up and drove home, where I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing my evidence and planning my next move. Owen thought he could buy his way out of this mess. Dana thought she could talk her way back into my good graces. They were both about to learn exactly how wrong they could be. Friday night arrived with a December storm that matched my mood, cold, bitter, and full of barely contained violence. I sat in my truck outside Hartwell Industries, watching employees leave for the weekend through rain-streaked windows. The building's parking lot emptied slowly, expensive cars carrying their owners home to families and obligations and lives that made sense. Dana's Honda was still in its usual spot near the executive entrance. Owen's BMW sat 3 spaces away, close enough for convenience, far enough apart to maintain the illusion of propriety. I'd been watching their patterns for a week now, learning their habits with the patience of a hunter. At 7:30, they emerged together, Dana carrying an overnight bag that she thought I hadn't noticed her packing. They walked to Owen's car without looking around, confident in their secrecy, comfortable in their deception. The BMW's headlights swept across my windshield as they pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward the interstate and Owen's house in the suburbs. I followed at a distance, staying far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to track their movements. Owen lived in Meadowbrook Estates, one of those gated communities where the houses all looked the same and the lawns were maintained by professionals. His place was a colonial revival with white columns and black shutters, the kind of house that screamed success to anyone driving by. I parked on the street outside the community gates and walked the perimeter until I found a section where the fence was low enough to climb. The security here was more for show than substance, cameras positioned to catch vandals and teenagers, not determined husbands with nothing left to lose. Owen's backyard was professionally landscaped, complete with a pool covered for winter, and a deck that probably cost more than my truck. Through the sliding glass doors, I could see into his living room, where Dana sat on a leather sofa with a glass of wine, laughing at something Owen had said. They looked comfortable together, natural in a way that made my chest tight with something that might have been grief. This wasn't just closeness or rebellion. They genuinely enjoyed each other's company. In some ways, that hurt worse than the betrayal itself. I took pictures through the window, documenting their evening together, building my case one frame at a time, but photography wasn't why I'd come here tonight. At 10 o'clock, I rang the front doorbell. Owen answered in a silk bathrobe, his hair mussed, his face flushed with wine and satisfaction. When he saw me standing on his porch, his expression cycled through confusion, recognition, and finally fear. "Harold? What are you doing here?" "Evening, Owen. Mind if I come in? I'd like to have a word with you and my wife." "This isn't a good time." I pushed past him into the foyer, tracking mud on his hardwood floors. The house smelled like expensive cologne and Dana's perfume, a combination that made my stomach turn. "Dana!" I called toward the living room. "Come say hello to your husband." She appeared in the doorway wearing one of Owen's shirts and nothing else, her face white with shock. For a moment we all stood frozen in a tableau of suburban adultery, the betrayed husband, the guilty wife, and the other man in his silk bathrobe. "Harold," Dana said finally, "you shouldn't be here." "Shouldn't I? This is where my wife spends her Friday nights. Seems like exactly where I should be." Owen found his voice. "Look, Harold, I know this looks bad, but we can work this out. Like civilized people." "Civilized people?" I laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You mean like civilized people who don't sleep with other men's wives? Or civilized people who don't humiliate their spouses at office parties?" "That was a mistake. I was drunk. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the photos I'd taken tonight, plus the ones from the motel, the restaurant, the office parking lot. "You want to know what I've been doing while you two have been playing house? I've been documenting everything, every meeting, every lie, every moment of this pathetic little affair." Dana stepped forward, her voice pleading. "Harold, please, let's go home and talk about this." "Home?" I showed her a picture of herself walking into Owen's house with her overnight bag. "This looks like home to you. My house is just where you keep your clothes." Owen was backing toward the kitchen, probably looking for his phone or a weapon or an escape route, but I wasn't here to hurt anyone, not physically anyway. "You know what the funny thing is?" I continued, still scrolling through photos. "You both think I'm pathetic. The invisible husband who doesn't fight back, doesn't make waves, just accepts whatever life hands him. You've been laughing about it for months." I found the screenshot I wanted, one of their text conversations, where they discussed my obliviousness in particularly cruel detail. "Harold's not the confrontational type," I read aloud. "Guys like him don't fight back, they just accept whatever life hands them." That was you, Owen. And Dana, you said I was like a piece of furniture, useful for fixing things and paying bills, but otherwise completely invisible. Dana's face crumpled. "I never meant—" "You meant every word," I said again. "Just like Owen meant what he said at the office party. The only difference is, now you're both going to find out exactly how visible I can be." I forwarded the photos to a contact list I'd been building all week. Dana's coworkers, Owen's friends, neighbors, family members. 43 people who would wake up tomorrow morning to a detailed documentation of the affair, complete with timestamps and locations. "What did you just do?" Owen demanded. "I made you both famous. By Monday morning, everyone you know will have seen these pictures. Your wife, Dana's sister, your golf buddies, the people at church. Everyone gets to share in your happiness." Dana was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. "Harold, please, you can't do this. My job, my reputation—" "Should have thought of that before you decided to redecorate Owen's bedroom." I headed for the door, then turned back. "Oh, and Owen, you might want to call your wife. I sent her the whole collection, including some particularly creative text messages about what you two do on her antique dining room table. I left them standing in the foyer, Dana sobbing and Owen frantically trying to call people whose phones were already buzzing with notifications. In my truck, I sat for a moment listening to the rain on the roof and feeling something that might have been satisfaction. The invisible man had just become the most visible person in their lives, and this was only the beginning. Saturday morning brought consequences like a hangover, inevitable, painful, and impossible to ignore. I woke up in the guest room to the sound of Dana's voice echoing through the house. alternating between tearful phone calls and shouted arguments with people whose weekends I'd just ruined. My phone had been buzzing since dawn with calls and texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Word travels fast in a town the size of ours, especially when it involves closeness, betrayal, and photographs that left nothing to the imagination. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the responses to my midnight photo dump. Dana's sister Jennifer had sent a string of messages that started with confusion and ended with rage. Owen's golf buddies were sharing the images in group chats, adding commentary that ranged from crude jokes to genuine shock. The Meadowbrook Estates neighborhood Facebook page had exploded with gossip and speculation, but it was the message from Rhonda Fraser that made me smile. "Harold, this is Owen's wife. Thank you for opening my eyes. I've been suspecting something for months, but I needed proof. My lawyer will be very interested in these photos. Would you be willing to testify in divorce proceedings?" I was typing a response when Dana stormed into the kitchen, still in the clothes she'd worn home at 3 a.m, her hair wild and her eyes red from crying. "Are you satisfied now?" she demanded. "Everyone knows." My mother called at 6 a.m. asking if the photos were real. Jennifer won't even speak to me. My boss wants to see me first thing Monday morning. "Consequences," I said mildly, not looking up from my phone. "Amazing how they work." "This is cruel, Harold, even for you." "Cruel?" I set the phone down and really looked at her for the first time in months. Without makeup, with her perfect facade stripped away, she looked older, smaller, more human. "You want to talk about cruel? Let's talk about 4 months of lies. Let's talk about you and Owen laughing about my ignorance while you planned your next motel visit. Let's talk about that office party, where you stood there smiling while he humiliated me in front of 50 people. She slumped into the chair across from me, suddenly deflated. "I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But this destroys everything. My career, my friendships, my family relationships. Was your revenge really worth burning down my entire life? You burned it down yourself. I just provided the matches." My phone rang. Mickey's name on the screen. "Dad? I just saw the photos. Jesus Christ, what happened?" "Your mother and I had a disagreement about the terms of our marriage." "Dad, everyone's talking about this. It's all over social media. Mom's friends are sharing the pictures, making jokes. This is nuclear-level revenge. Your mother made choices. I'm helping her live with them." Silence on the line. Then, "Are you okay? I mean, really okay?" The question caught me off guard. In all the planning, all the plotting, I hadn't stopped to consider how I felt about any of this. Satisfied? Vindicated? Empty? "I'm handling it," I said finally. "That's not an answer, Dad. It's the only one I have." After I hung up, Dana and I sat in silence, the kitchen filled with the weight of 23 years of marriage collapsing in real time. Outside, I could see neighbors walking by more slowly than usual, their heads turned toward our house with the hungry curiosity of people witnessing a disaster. "So what happens now?" Dana asked finally. "Now you get to experience life as a visible person. No more sneaking around, no more secret phone calls, no more pretending we're a happy family. Everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've been doing." "And Owen?" I smiled, thinking about the messages I'd been receiving all morning from his coworkers, his neighbors, his ex-wives, who were suddenly very interested in revisiting old grievances. "Owen's about to learn that actions have consequences. His wife's filing for divorce and taking half of everything he owns. His boss wants to discuss the company's morality clause, and his homeowners association is very concerned about the impact on property values." Dana stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You've changed, Harold. This isn't who you used to be." "You're right. The old Harold was invisible, harmless, willing to accept whatever life handed him, but that Harold was married to a woman who loved him, or at least pretended to. You eliminated that man, Dana. What's left is someone you probably shouldn't have messed with." She started crying again, quiet tears that might have moved me a month ago. Now they just seemed like another performance, another attempt to manipulate a situation that had moved far beyond her control. "I'm going to stay at Jennifer's for a while," she said finally. "Give us both time to think." "Good idea. Take everything you need. I have a feeling you won't be coming back." She looked around the kitchen, at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals, at the refrigerator covered with photos of happier times, at the life we'd built together before she decided it wasn't enough. "I did love you, Harold. Once upon a time." "I know," I said. "That's what makes this so satisfying." She left an hour later with 2 suitcases and the look of someone who'd just realized that actions have consequences. I watched from the window as she loaded her car, noting how she kept glancing around to see if the neighbors were watching. They were. Everyone was watching now. Harold Vance, the invisible man, had made sure of that. 3 weeks later, I sat in Murphy's Tavern with Lyle, watching the local news coverage of Owen Fraser's very public downfall. The reporter was standing outside Hartwell Industries, explaining how a workplace relationship had led to harassment charges, a messy divorce, and the resignation of a senior executive. "Workplace relationship," Lyle snorted. "That's one way to put it." The story had grown beyond my original photo dump, feeding on itself like a fire in dry grass. Owen's ex-wives had come forward with stories of his serial infidelity. Female employees at Hartwell had filed complaints about his behavior. The company's board had conducted an investigation that revealed a pattern of misconduct going back years. Dana had been fired the Monday after our kitchen confrontation, officially for violating company policy regarding workplace relationships, unofficially for being stupid enough to get caught. She was living with her sister now, working part-time at a retail store and avoiding eye contact with anyone who might recognize her from the photos. "You feel bad for her?" Lyle asked, reading my expression. "Sometimes. Then I remember what she said about me being furniture, and the feeling passes." My phone buzzed with a text from Mickey. "Dad, are you watching the news? This is insane." I typed back, "Justice is rarely pretty." "Are you happy now?" she responded. That was the question everyone kept asking, and I still didn't have a good answer. Happy seemed like the wrong word for what I felt. Satisfied, maybe? Complete, like I'd finished something that needed finishing. On the television, the reporter was interviewing Rhonda Fraser outside the courthouse, where she'd just been awarded half of Owen's assets in their divorce settlement. "Mrs. Fraser, do you have any comment on your ex-husband's situation?" Rhonda smiled the kind of smile that could cut glass. "I'm just grateful that someone finally had the courage to expose the truth. Owen spent years making women feel invisible, worthless, like their feelings didn't matter. Now he gets to see how that feels." The story cut to footage of Owen leaving his lawyer's office, head down, expensive suit rumpled, looking like a man who'd discovered that consequences were real. He'd lost his job, his house, his reputation, and most of his money. The golden boy of Hartwell Industries had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris. "You know what the best part is?" I told Lyle. "He still doesn't understand what he did wrong. He thinks this is all about closeness, about getting caught with his pants down. He doesn't realize it was about respect, about treating people like they matter." "And Dana?" I thought about my wife. Ex-wife, technically, since the divorce had been finalized last week. She'd tried to fight it at first, claiming temporary insanity, emotional distress, anything that might preserve some dignity. But the evidence was overwhelming, and her lawyer had eventually convinced her to accept my terms. I got the house, the retirement accounts, and the satisfaction of knowing that everyone in town knew exactly who she really was. She got her freedom and the chance to start over somewhere else if she was smart enough to take it. "Dana's learning to be visible," I said. "It's a hard lesson, but an important one." The news moved on to other stories: politics, weather, sports scores that didn't matter to anyone except the people who'd bet money on them. Normal life resuming its normal rhythm, the scandal already fading into background noise. But I knew it would never really fade, not completely. In a town this size, stories like this became part of the local mythology, passed down through generations of gossips and morality tale enthusiasts. Owen and Dana would be remembered as cautionary figures, examples of what happened when you forgot that other people had feelings. And I would be remembered as the invisible man who'd refused to stay invisible. My phone rang, Mickey's name on the screen. "Dad, I wanted to check on you, make sure you're okay." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than fine, actually." "Good, because I have news. I'm graduating summa cum laude and I got accepted to law school." "That's wonderful, baby. I'm proud of you." "Thanks. And Dad? I know this whole thing with Mom was hard on you, but I want you to know that I understand why you did it. She needed to face consequences for her actions. You're not angry with me? For standing up for yourself? For refusing to be treated like furniture? Never." After we hung up, I sat in the bar for another hour, nursing my beer and watching the world go by outside the windows. Normal people living normal lives, making normal mistakes and paying normal prices for them. I thought about Dana, probably sitting in her sister's guest room, wondering how her life had gone so wrong so quickly. I thought about Owen, explaining to potential employers why his previous job had ended in scandal. I thought about the invisible man I used to be, and the visible man I'd become. Tomorrow I would wake up in my own house, in my own bed, surrounded by the life I'd built for myself. I would go to work, come home, fix things that were broken, and sleep soundly knowing that I'd never again be taken for granted. Harold Vance, the piece of furniture, was gone forever. What remained was something harder, sharper, more dangerous. A man who'd learned that sometimes the only way to be seen is to make yourself impossible to ignore. I finished my beer, left money on the table, and walked out into the cold December night. Behind me, Murphy's Tavern glowed with warm light and the promise of other people's stories, other people's dramas, other people's revenge fantasies. But mine was complete.